Sugar, Sukkar, Zachari, is something that we take for granted today. It's something very common. It's on our breakfast table and it's in our foods. But it wasn't the case 500, 600, 700 years ago. It was a very valuable commodity. Queen Elizabeth I of England had rotten teeth because she loved eating sugar. If you wanted to take a very valuable gift to not just a royal member of family, but royal member of family, a king and a queen, a bowl of sugar. And in many museums, most museums in Europe and the world, you find beautiful ornate sugar bowls made out of ceramic glass, which exactly highlight this very valuable commodity some 500, 600 years ago. But where did the story begin? The story. First of all, sugar. Its Latin name, Sacharum Officinarum, is a plant, a kind of a grass plant, which originates in Asia. All plants have some kind of sweetness in them, but this particular plant, the sugarcane, has a particularly high density of sweetness, and therefore in ancient times and in medieval times it has been chosen to add to sweets, to sweeten foods, to sweeten drinks. Before cake there was bread. You add sugar, you make bread. You add sugar to your tea and coffee, it tastes nice, and it also is addictive. So sugar was something which was naturally, which was present in nature as a plant, but it was something that was sought after. Sugar has also been used naturally as preservatives for fruits and vegetables, but also for medicine and drugs. And we all know that a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine taste better, go down, as this very strict English lady has taught us. As I mentioned, origins of the plant, the sugar cane plant, are coming from Southeast Asia, from what is now Cambodia, Vietnam, and India, particularly in India, where even today you get traditional processing of sugar canes. As you can see here, a very simple press is being, sugar canes are being pressed, and the juice comes out, and it's basically something that in Southeast Asia and in India is on a home scale. It wasn't on a big scale. It was always used and known as a sweetener. Alexander the Great, who conquered what was 2,500 years, the known world from Greece all the way to Anatolia and India, his generals and his soldiers came across this reed, this sugarcane reed, which they said was a reed that had honey. It's a honey reeds. And that was the first that we know of it in the West, these reeds of honey. In the later Byzantine, Roman and Byzantine periods, we have pots such as this, which was actually found on our site in Jordan, which mention the word honey. And honey was a very valuable sweetener and a very valuable natural product, but it was soon to be replaced by another sweetener. During the early medieval times, particularly in the Abbasid period, Arab scientists took to translating as much as possible of ancient Greek literature, science, and developed chemistry, developed mathematics, all on the basis of ancient Greek, but developed it to a very high point. And particularly in Baghdad, in an institution called the Beit al-Hikmah, where they were translating these things. And one of the products that was mentioned is actually the sugar cane. Much later, Ibn al-Baitar actually mentions it in his book of Simple Medicines and Foods, and sugar cane comes into the West via the Arabs in the Middle East. In fact, Ibn Batir was actually from what is now Spain, Andalusia, in Malaga, where you have his hometown is. But that's all part of the Arab world, and all this science and medicine and mathematics, which are being translated and developed during this period, are part of this scientific boom. I first arrived in the Ghor es-Safi with an ACOR project. Burton MacDonald was doing a survey of the southern Ghors, and I arrived there in 1986, working on his survey and doing basically drawing his pottery to survive as an archaeologist. Barbara mentioned that I've been here 30 years. I'm actually going into my 31st year of Jordan, but in 1986 was the first time I went to the area. And one of the places we visited was site number 46, which was on Burton MacDonald's survey. And here I am the first day picking up some sherds. About 25 years later, it's now published as a book of Dera Nabata. So site number 46 turned out to be a very interesting early Christian site devoted to the story of Lot. But that's not the topic of discussion this evening. But it did take me to this area and attract me not only to the area, but to the archaeology of the area. And the area is a very interesting and unknown area up until the last 15, 20 years, called the Ghor es-Safi, which actually at this point is the lowest depression of the Dead Sea. And if the Dead Sea is the lowest body of water, the lowest place on Earth, the absolute lowest point, something like minus 405, 408 meters below sea level, is the Ghor es-Safi. And it's this area here, Dera Nabata, the monastery of Lot, and the other sites of the sugar factory and other period sites, Bronze Age, Iron Age sites of the Ghor es-Safi that I've been focusing my work in the last 20 years or so. So originally I came with this ACOR project of Burton MacDonald's to work on the survey, picked up one of these sites and developed it, excavated it with the help of the British Museum and other friends, including friends and institutions such as, and companies such as Aramex, and later on other institutions and friends that have always helped me, such as people that are present here today, and I don't want to mention too many names, but I'm very happy that I've always had support from private and public institutions in Jordan. So this is the area of the Ghor es-Safi, the lowest place on Earth. The name of the Ghor es-Safi in antiquity was known from the Old Testament. It was one of the 5 cities of the plain, Zoar, or the small place. In the Madaba map, which I'm sure you all know, it's shown here. A detail shows Zoara, a town by the Dead Sea, surrounded by palm trees and a fortified city. Above is the monastery of Lot, and here we have the geography, more or less what it looks like on the Madaba map, the Wadi al-Hasa, and in the distance the monastery of Lot. It was a fairly wealthy, relatively wealthy town based on agriculture throughout the periods, even from earlier periods, and it was really due to the Wadi al-Hasa, the waters, the fresh waters that come down from the plateau and come out into the Dead Sea. But this fertile plain is the key to the success of this area for over 10,000 years. Now, it's not the biggest Wadi al-Hasa, it's the second. And you say, well, why doesn't the Wadi Mujib have such a successful occupation? It's because of the way that the Wadi Mujib, the alluvial fans, the soils that spill out to the Wadi Mujib have it's a very small, limited area, and it's very steep. There isn't any area to develop occupation. On the contrary, the Ghor es-Safi has quite a large area, which over a millennium have been able to sustain populations. Medieval maps mention the town of Zoara, Segor. This is the Crusader name of the town. And here, in a Bible which is in St. Catherine's, it mentions again Segor. This is what it looked like in the medieval times, in the early medieval times, early Christian and medieval times. Substantial city. In a Fatimid-period 12th century map, here also mentions Zoara. This is actually transliterated into English or Latin letters, but it's an Arabic map, again showing how important it is. And in Arabic texts, a Zughar or es-Safi is an important commercial city in the medieval, early Islamic times. It's actually compared by Makdisi and Yaqut and other Arab writers. It's compared to Bosra as in the south of what is now Iraq, and even Damascus as an important commercial center. So it stands along with those type of, that category of commercial cities. And why? Primarily because of the agricultural products and its location. This is what it looks like today from a helicopter aerial photograph that I took some years ago. This is the Dead Sea. You see how rich the I don't have to say much. This is a very rich agricultural area even today. But these ashy areas are the areas of the Khirbet Sheikh Isa, the remnants of what is medieval and early Christian Zoara or es-Zughar. This is the area of the sugar, of what we've identified as the sugar factory or the Tawahin al-Sukkar. And these little holes here, tens of thousands, are the early Bronze Age tombs, which we're not going to discuss in this lecture, but it's a very rich area. In fact, the early Bronze Age, which I'm not going to mention, I just said I wasn't, has one of the biggest cemeteries in Jordan. I think Dr. Ghazi Bishi even said in the Middle East at one point. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of burials from 5,000 years ago, which again highlights the fact that this area could sustain a high population because of the agriculture and because of the waters from the Wadi al-Hasa. Now, I'm jumping some years of work that we've been doing. This work began over a period of the last 12, 13 years, initially supported, well, a number of universities have come to help. We've had support from Glasgow University, we've had support from Adelaide University, we've had support from Sydney, but more recently we've had stronger support coming from Al-Himma, a new foundation here in Jordan, and very recently, now as of last year, the SCHEP USAID project. But with the work that we've been doing the last 2 years, we're beginning to reconstruct what we've done. Sorry, I should also mention Aramex. These are the three main institutions, private institutions that have helped support this project in the last 3-4 years. Aramex, Al-Himma, and now SCHEP USAID. Our team consists of mostly specialists that we bring in, along with the local community, of course, that we work with. And now, particularly with this SCHEP program that I'll be speaking about in a while, we have more intense training program. But I have to say, and I think if you ask, over the last 25 years, even before these official training programs began, we always had a local element. We always worked with the local people. We always tried to bring them up to a level which they need to be brought up. And just developing the sites of the Sanctuary of Lot, developing the museum, which is not part of this lecture, but certainly I'm going to mention in a moment. And then finally, moving on to this site, has helped bring pride to the local community and understanding their local heritage, giving them pride, and giving them jobs also. So along with a personal local pride in understanding what their heritage is and what their cultural heritage is, also providing some jobs has been a key factor in our project. And I must say that even the es-Safi Women's Project, which is now famous, was begun by one of our, well, not begun, but was given a very big shot in the arm by one of our members some 20 years ago. So what you have here is the first elements of the excavations that were done, as I said, with support from Aramex and Al-Himma, and it exposed the upper pressing rooms of the so-called Tawahin Sukkar, the sugar mills. But there's a lot more. And now, in the last year, with support from SCHEP, we've been able to understand a lot more the gearing mechanisms, and more. So, what we have, remnants of water channels coming from the Wadi al-Hasa, 2 of them. This is a reconstruction. Turning around these very heavy pressing stones. This is not a mill. It's not pulverizing like you do flour, but pressing like you do olives or grapes. The juice then is collected. It goes across a bridge. This is the remnants of the water channel. There's a remnant of a bridge. And it goes across into an area which I'll show you soon, which we've just uncovered last week. But before that, we try to understand the gearing mechanism underneath. There's the lower room, there's the upper chamber, the crushing chamber, the lower gearing room. We have the water that turns the pressing stones above is actually powered by a fairly complicated gearing and system with wooden panels. And this is this is underneath. This is the archaeological documentation, and this is the reconstruction. So we've been trying to understand the gearing mechanisms and the water system and the irrigation. Now, this is also not something which has come out of nowhere. The Sasanians, we know, in the 6th, 7th centuries AD, 8th centuries AD, were experts at water management. The Byzantines and the Romans too, and of course the Nabateans. But this particular type of water channeling and moving to a long distance was something that was perfected by the Sasanians. And particularly the site of Shushtar in Iran is a good example of how that site would have, how these mills, these sugar mills would have worked. And you can see here the wooden paddles underneath and the upper millstones here, all fed by this complex of water channels that the water is brought from quite far away. Here in the Wadi al-Hasa, you see these water channels. There's a Nabatean cut one, and there's a modern one, but during one rainstorm, it exposed some of the probably medieval dams and water channels, so we recorded these, and they're similar to the ones I just showed you in Iran and Shushtar. This is our reconstructions, the water channels from the Safi site, and there is the chute, which would turn around this kind of paddle wheels, and then the water runs out into the fields to irrigate the fields. In the Persian-Iranian model is called Qanat system, and this is this kind of Qanat system that I'm talking about. They've actually modeled it, borrowed it, developed it from the Sasanian Persian type of water system. So we have mechanisms, we have water systems, we have irrigation systems, but we have more. This is the remnants of the sugar factory as it is today, and surrounded by fields, as it would have been in the past, sugar cane fields. One of the studies that we've done is looking at the animal bones. We don't just look at structures and architecture and bits of pottery, which you'll see in a moment, but we also study the animal bones. And several pieces of of cows that have come up have identified the type of cow as a zebu. What's a zebu? Well, it's not a normal cow which you have for milk and meat. It's for tilling the fields and for, draft. It's a draft animal. So by having these animals, it shows us, first of all, that they're using this in the agricultural fields. And the date of them is usually older animals, which means they're not being consumed. They're not for meat and milk. The other thing about the zebu is, like sugarcane, it's coming from India or Asia. This is not an indigenous animal, so they've brought it. They're bringing the system, the water system, they're bringing the cane, but they're also bringing the animals. So today, Ghor Safi, this evening there'll be, tomato bandura trucks coming up to Amman. This is what it's like during the day, the sugar factories in the distance, but it would have been very similar in the past, except for it would have been surrounded by sugar cane instead of tomato plants or tomato plants. There is a number of studies trying to understand the sugar cane production. We've been trying to fine-tune this, but basically it begins with cultivating and harvesting the actual canes themselves, the plants, then shredding them, cutting them into pieces, crushing them in this so-called mill or press, then carrying the juice to an area where they would boil them, and maybe again boil them again, then put them in the specialized pottery that would crystallize the sugar and eventually come up with what we know is white sugar today. This is what we're trying now to find out from archaeological terms. In the ash deposits, we actually have found now also fragments of sugarcane, like this one, so we can actually prove not only that they were actually using sugarcane, but there is actually a species specific of sugarcane which yields higher sugar. What other evidence do we have? Well, we have found so far one of these large cauldrons, bowls for boiling. I've found them. They also exist in the Al-Azam Palace in Damascus. They also exist in Louisiana and more recent kind of sugar production areas. But the technology is all there and it's continuing. And what I'm showing to you now is that the origins are coming from the Jordan Valley. The origins of industrial scale production. And side products such as, I'll talk about pottery in a moment, but even this mold-made cauldron, do you see these kind of ridges? That means it's made by a mold. This large-scale copper production is something that is not normally made for average kitchens or domestic use. It's now being made on an industrial scale. So we're beginning to see production moving not on a common domestic level, but industrial. This is the boiling process I mentioned to you. And again, not just one single little bowl or a little bit press like we have in India, but large scale, a long series of boiling vats, such as this one here, copper. Copper is always better. It conducts heat much better, as I'm sure all you cooks know, that to have these French pans are much better than the any other kind of pans. And copper distributes heat really well, which is why it's sought after. And here they're actually boiling syrup. This is actually in Oman. But there are a number of depictions from medieval times which show the sugar industry. So we have descriptive sources. Here in the area, from a source in Italy, actually I think it's in Firenze in the library, in the university library, they mentioned the best sugar which was imported from the area coming from Monreal, which could be Shabak or it could be Kerak. But the point is that they're importing it from here. And this is what these crystals would have looked like. But it's going, at that time, 12th to 14th century AD, the Europeans didn't know how to, didn't know how to produce it. It was very valuable and it was being exported to Europe. Exported, how was it exported? Well, we have a number of trade routes that we know from Roman and medieval times. This is Safi, Zughar, Zoara from the Bible. And if you look at it this way, it is pretty central. If you're looking at Gaza, the main port of the Mediterranean, of the southern Mediterranean, it's very close. Of course, Kerak and Ayla and Aqaba are also not very far, but it is, for the southern Levant, it's a very good central location for commerce. We've done a more detailed survey and we've worked out road network with Roman and Islamic medieval pottery. So these roads, there's 3 road networks going east, and this Nakab actually even had paintings, drawings of camel and even camel dung. So sure that even recently, south of Safi, they're using it. The camels are being used for transport. And here you have a photograph of camels carrying sugar cane in Egypt, which I thought was a very nice photograph. Now, what has SCHEP sponsored in the last 10 months? Because we're approaching 11 or 12 months, actually. We've done, aside from, well, first I'll tell you the field work related to our archaeological work. We've just completed the second short season. Some of the work we did last year you saw in the previous photographs. This stuff now you're seeing for the first time in public and unpublished, and all we have is a sketch, is the continuation of the water of this channel for the sugar juice that's being the juice that's being pressed and leading where? It took us unfortunately 3 weeks and 386 cubic meters of sand to find this in the last days, but in this area here that we're all very curiously looking at, is this bit here in this rough sketch. You see a little hole. This is the water channel. There's a little hole here leading into another part of a basin. Not very clear, but all of that is coming from the press. Here's the juice from the press. Here is the bridge, which is now gone. You saw in the reconstruction, and leading out to where? Now you get a better impression from the other side. This is the presses, the water chutes, the presses, the sugar juice. Now you can see the channel coming and leading up to here and going out this way, out from here. Here's the outlet in this very nicely constructed arch. The basin, and going right east that way, and then our dig permit expired. And we buried it. It's virtually intact. In fact, I have to admit that the top of it was arched with bricks, and we damaged it, but we didn't know it was there. And there are at least 2, maybe 3 or 4, or maybe even more. At this point here, where there's the outlet, there was a 14th century Ayyubid Mamluk pot lodged in there, so we know the final period it was used. And being good archaeologists, we stuck our hand down the channel. Now this channel I keep talking about, this conduit where the sugar juice is flowing through, is just plaster. But we stuck our hand underneath here and picked out this. It's lead. And it's a segment of lead, and there's iron nails, and all of this would have been covered in lead, because it had to be clean, and had to be cleaned. So it was robbed in antiquity. Lead is expensive, obviously, but since we stuck our hand underneath there, this part here was protected, and now we know that all this was a lead conduit channeling in the pressed sugar juice to the boiling rooms this way, where then they would be condensed and turned into the sugar we know. That's what I'm talking about. This is our reconstruction. It's being pressed, the boiling vats, then they put them in these specialized pots, and as they dry, they put them through the cones. The molasses drips through the bottom, and the upper parts crystallize, and you break the pots, and you have the sugar cone, which is very valuable in the 12th, 14th centuries. What's this? This is a similar plan of a similar sugar factory with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I said there's going to be at least 8 in Cyprus. There's the mill, the press. There's the boiling rooms, storerooms, where the pots are the curing rooms. So we know what we expect to find from Cyprus. There's 3 excavations in Cyprus where they've excavated sugar factories like this. So we know what to expect. This is my little sketch here, very bad. I had to do it quickly because our architect wasn't around. That's what we found, and this is what we propose. You know, we find at least 6, 7, or 8 of these boiling vats in the future. Okay, the date of this. Ours are dated at least 12th century. I'd like it, well, I was hoping it could be a Abbasid or a Fatimid, but it's certainly 12th century, 12th to 14th century. The Cypriot ones that are later are 14th to 15th century. So ours is the prototype. And in fact, if you look at some of the architecture, even the architectural stones, they are very similar to the Cyprus ones, which are later. Now, what are these little bits here? I've mentioned to you already that they're producing sugar now on a big scale, industrial scale. I showed you the cauldron, which is an industrial kind of vat. It's not, a cooking pot. I've mentioned to you the pottery, and I'll mention some more of the pottery. But we came up with almost 100 of these kind of iron crucibles. So they're also smelting iron here. Once you get a factory going, it's not going to be just for one product. So it seems as if there was a side production here of iron. What they were used for, we're not sure, but there is some theories. Some of you might ask me, what were they using for fuels? I see I've stopped you before you can ask me. There's something called bagas, which sounds rude, but it's basically when you crush the sugar cane, you get the fibrous material. So what you do is you feed it to your animals or you use it as fuel. And considering down there isn't much fuel, you don't want to cut the few trees that are around, that's probably the main fuel. And why in the ashy areas, this is what we've picked out, is bits of smashed, crushed sugarcane. Pottery. We have a kiln on site, and probably quite a large kiln. These are bits of sugar pots stuck together. They're mistakes, they're rubbish. They were thrown away, but archaeologists love rubbish, so we collect them and we study them. This is what is this? a little, spinach pie or something? No, it's a tripod inside a kiln where you stack up pots and you stack them on top of each other to fire them. And this is a piece of kiln wall. It's actually the inside of the pottery oven. And these are fragments of sugar pots, various types. We definitely have evidence, 100% evidence, of a sugar kiln, of a pottery kiln. And this year, again with SCHEP support, we were excavating this area, which I was hoping would be even more conclusive as a pottery kiln. But what we definitely have is the structures of part of a kiln and more wasters, rubbish pottery, and even 2 molasses sugar pots in situ here. And these are only about 2 weeks old, these photographs, actually even less. Of course, we have other pottery from the site. It's not just common sugar pots, because we're talking about over a ton of sugar pots that we've excavated so far, and that's a small amount. We have fineware from northern Syria, from Raqqa, God bless Raqqa, and from Cyprus, making the connection with the sugar industry. So the latest period, it's beginning again from 12th to 15th. Now these are fine wares, these are glazed wares. What they're doing in this area is interesting, and I'll mention that a bit later, but keep in mind that these are valuable fine wares, not something that your average worker would have in his home. In Damascus, inshallah we'll go there again one day, if you go in the entrance, there's a column, and it's inscribed right in the entrance, showing you how important it is. It's a column which dates the 9th century AD, and it's the Caliph Nasr Bursal says that the sugar of al-Ghor, that's the same word they use, the Jordan Valley, all of it, belongs to him, and that this is the production of that belongs to the Sultan in Damascus. And we know from text that the Sultan would send a representative every season to collect the sugarcane and the monies, and that it's not just Safi, it's the whole Jordan Valley. And on Saturday, we're going to have a lecture by Ruba, but down there, in Arabic, about the North Jordan Valley. The whole Jordan Valley was one big factory. And they were just churning out sugar, or I'm not sure churning is the right word, but producing sugar, and they were making a lot of money, particularly the Europeans who had a literally sweet tooth. So I think this highlights the importance of that sugar played. This is like a major, this is the mosque of the Bilad al-Sham, of the whole Levant. And then we come to Jordan again, the museum. We have a new museum with the Department of Antiquities, which we've built, and one of the main themes is the story of sugar and the excavations that I've just been talking about. It's one of the themes. It's located just below the monastery of Lot, St. Lot, the Lot's Cave site, and it has antiquities from 12, 15,000 years, but sugar is certainly one of the themes in that museum. I just completed a 3-year research which was funded by the European Union, and perfect timing for me to work with SCHEP because now I'm unemployed. And we had a conference last year, and we've published, what book is about to come out, and I'll certainly be available here soon. And we did an exhibition on the origins of the sugarcane industry and the transmission of ancient Greek and medieval Arab science technology from the Near East to Europe. That was to satisfy the Europeans. Anyhow, it was very successful, and Ruba came and gave a talk, and sponsored by SCHEP, and that was very, very successful. And these are a couple of the posters that went on display. We had the top scholars from Cyprus and elsewhere coming, and we had really a very complete conference discussing all this. And now, we've basically laid the academic foundations to what we can do now. These are some of the books that have already been published. The famous Sweetness and Power by Sidney Mintz, which is more cultural, anthropological, and focusing on the issues of the labor intensity issue, economics of sugar, which I'm not dealing with, basically the delicate issue of slavery. But others, such as Professor Sato, has done a detailed social analysis on the history, particularly in Egypt, on sugar. Another French colleague, French, I think North African, has done a PhD in French, le sucre, also studying it. And this is the book that I've just completed, and hopefully it'll be out here for you soon. On the topic is, the name is the same as the research project, again talking about the sugar industry. And in a few months we're going to be submitting a volume to the Palestine Exploration Fund in London, which will include the support that ACOR and SCHEP have, because ACOR had a 6-month fellowship here, and all the work that was done during that period is going to go in this first volume of the surveys and excavation in the es-Safi, and of course the sugar will be prominently published. What are we doing now? Or yesterday, for instance. I have a couple of weeks more. By the end of the month, I have to present the deliverables, as the people like to say, or the milestones. And aside from the archaeological work, which we employed people and we, together with them, we trained them to excavate and consolidate what we could, we are also preserving and getting the site ready for visitors. Now, this is an old photograph, so don't look at it. There's a lot that's happened since then. In fact, it's very old. It's 1998, I think, or 97. We've excavated these areas here. These are the ashy bits where the boiling rooms are. It's a very good photograph. That's why I'm showing it. But what we started to do is, we've already planted over 500 little seeds and seedlings, little plants, another 200 all around the site. This is the proposed area of the car park. Here you have the local fellows, trainees that are planting them. And with the help of Aramex, 10 o'clock on Friday, we're getting 200 pallets to start putting them in the sand and using them as a walkway. These pallets are going to be ideal because they can be moved if we don't like them. They're easily put in the sand. You can't really put concrete and stuff. So we're going to use these, and they're reusable. So it's something that's, reused. We're reusing wooden pallets. We're using local thorny bushes as fences. And this is all being done with the local people, and I don't even have to be there because they know what to do now. That's the greatest thing. I'm almost finished. Another thing that we've now designed, submitted to the department at SCHEP, is the site signs. I'm just going to very quickly show you the 6-7 signs. This one is a major aerial photograph locating the sites. This one is a cross-section just from that sugar factory, looking at the fantastic escarpment, looking at all the geological periods. And I've drawn these like little lines and distinguished them and dated them, so people will be able to stand there on the site and say, that's that, that's that, that's that. Another theme which is taking up from this aerial photograph, most of the standing structures you see there are of mud brick, and it belongs to the last phase, which was an Ottoman police post. In fact, we know now the date. There was an Australian scholar who was here recently. We know the date that Lawrence and the Arab Legion attacked this. It was, I think, something like 14th of September, 1914. So we know when they attacked it, and they took it. And this was, like I said, an Ottoman police post. So I've written a little bit about the Ottoman Empire and some of the gun shells that we found, which are dated in Ottoman and in German, because they were the Germans and the Ottomans were obviously allies. So inside the fort here, we've got about 80 shells. They are firing them outside. And we have a few shells that are British and French, which were presumably from the Arab Legion. So that's the last period of occupation. Plus, there is a third mill, and this is really a mill on the edge, which is very different from the other sugar presses. And it's associated, I think, to the late 19th or early 20th century flour milling. And we have in the old village of Safi still remnants of an iron mill, but this was also a water-fed mill. So we have a flour mill, which are well known, and there are scholars that have done some studies, Alison McQuitty and Carol Palmer is with us too, can probably say more about agriculture in the early 20th century, but we have this bit of evidence. So that will be one poster explaining that. The other three posters will talk about the gearing mechanisms that I just mentioned to you, some details about how the wheels turned, then generally about the components of the site. This is not completed. I don't have the Arabic yet, but I'm just showing this to you before it's completed. And then the water system, very important, understanding the water system, the Qanat system I mentioned to you earlier, and even a photograph of Shistar and the Wadi al-Hasa. So these are the 6 posters. There will also be a reusable plasticated brochure, maybe about A3 size, which will have these key stages in the sugar production. Some of the photographs, maybe this is too much, but there's such exciting images that I wanted to show them. Plus, we've done a model of how the whole process works. Bringing in the canes, chopping them up, pressing them, collecting the juices. Here, the animals are eating the bagasse, and then the water goes off into the irrigation fields. A little bit about historical, and so this will be a plasticated poster that you will take with you and return. Now, it's possible that if some people want to keep it, we can have copies for sale, but the idea is for people not to throw rubbish around. There will also be a text, another 2-page text, which will accompany this if they want more information. A few days ago, we were putting together pots because we began last year by doing a conservation training program, a Greek conservator. We've had 2 conservators come out, one a mosaic conservator and one a ceramic and ceramic and small object conservator, and they've already reached a level where they can be worked by themselves. This man here is now a trained Jordanian conservator. He works for the Department of Antiquities, Muhammad Ali, and they are now working, and he is now training them. He's been trained by our people, and now he's training them. And I can tell you they work very happily and very excited in putting together these pots, sugar pots and other handmade pots. And this is in the museum. So we're also using the museum facilities. The other thing we did last year, we're continuing it this year, is the SCHEP Museum museum management program. We went through all the storerooms and recatalogued objects that were not catalogued, and we're lucky to have the curator here with us from Safi, Dr. Jamila, and here she is, both sitting at her desk, cataloging, doing really boring cataloging, but also in here, inside the case. So we moved only a few days ago, the case, reorganized things, so both bureaucratic stuff and practical things to make it better. We're aiming with Jamila, we're on the 15th of May to have it's Museums Day, to have a special educational program. So this is definitely something that SCHEP has helped, and I hope will continue to help with bringing the archaeology and the people that were trained, not only on the site and the conservators, but a few of the people that we helped work a better museum management training. Then, almost over, is this tutorial seminars, which I think has been more successful than I imagined, but it's probably given me a bit of a headache. But I thought we had these people coming to visit Jordan, coming to visit, working with our site down in Safi. Why not have everyone give a little short 20-minute talk to the local community? So Aaron Addison and I, or maybe Aaron Addison, we had this idea to do these tutorial seminars, not a big lecture series. The problem is they look so good, and the lectures were by such good international academics that everybody wanted to come to them, and they wanted to, it became a lot more successful than I had imagined. It drew it drew more attention. So here we have Dr. Louise Martin literally showing the local people, the staff, museum staff, and the trainees, animal bones. Here I'm talking about the es-Safi project. And this was meant for the local community. As you can see, it's for the local community, but open to everyone. The list continues. The next one is Ruba Abudelu, who will be speaking on Saturday on really the entire sugar industry in the Jordan Valley, not just the one site that I spoke about. And if any of you are free on Saturday, you come and we'll have a little lunch also. And that's where I'll end today, because the project is continuing. And I want to thank you for coming, and thank you for your support.